when you go from running around to trying to do something more serious with your mind, it's hard, and the chanting acts as a way to kind of bridge that, and it gets us in touch with our feelings of confidence and trust in the Buddha, in the Dharma that he taught, and in the Sangha that helped to guide us. And so by reaffirming our refuge, by reaffirming our motivation, then it really makes the meditation we're about to do into a Buddhist practice. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of benefits that come from that. I know for many people it requires an adjustment of the mind. It's so interesting how different people have different ways of thinking. Some people, they grew up in the same religion that, let's say, had a lot of chanting and ritual. And they come into Buddhism and they love the chanting and ritual because it's familiar with what they had as a child. Other people grew up in the same religion, come into Buddhism and say, I can't stand chanting and ritual, that's why I left that one. So it's a very good illustration of how nothing is inherently existent. It all depends on how the mind is looking at it. Like I said, that with the first chant, when we're bowing to the Buddha, it's very helpful just to imagine the Buddha in the space in front, and think of his qualities. Imagine him surrounded by all the bodhisattvas, all the beings that are our role models, who we want to become like, and think of their qualities, and then we're paying homage, we're generating respect and appreciation for those qualities, and that can be that opens us to develop those same qualities. Yeah. I just received an email this morning from somebody who was in a really bad rock climbing accident, and I'll read the whole thing on BBC next week. But he wound up getting airlifted out and wound up in Harborview in the emergency room for 6 days because there wasn't a bed. And being in the emergency room with all the sounds and everything going on, that just really got to him. And he was having dreams of being in the hell realm. And his wife brought in a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama one day. And he wrote that just really helped him a lot, because it made him remember that when you're suffering, there are other people who are aware of your suffering. And so, just that knowledge that there's other people who are not only aware, but who care, who have compassion for your suffering, that alone was something that really helped soothe him. And what I was impressed with was he didn't just leave it at that, but the next night when he had dreams of people in suffering, he was generating compassion for them and communicating with them that he understood their suffering and wished them to be free of it. Okay? So when we visualize the Buddha and we're, expressing our devotion and our confidence and thinking of the Buddha's qualities in this way, then it helps us experience them and also to generate them in our own hearts and minds. Okay, so the bowing and chanting, it's not just ritual to go blah blah. Who needs to go blah blah? We already blah blah enough on the telephone, on the internet, and with our friends all day, blah blah. When we're chanting, we're using our speech in a very different way, and we're using our mind in a very different way. Okay? Okay, let's do we'll start out with a few more chants here. Paying homage to the Buddha. And then we'll do a few minutes of breathing meditation, just watching your breath, breathing normally and naturally, not forcing your breath in any way, but just observing it, experiencing it, being aware of how your breath connects you to the rest of the universe, but without letting your mind go wander in the rest of the universe. Okay, if your mind starts doing that, bring it back home to the breath. Okay, so become interested in your breath and observe it, experience it. And so we'll do that for a few minutes, and then afterwards I'll kind of talk a little bit about concentration, and then we'll do some more meditation. Okay, so again we visualize the Buddha in the space in front, surrounded by all the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. When you visualize, you're not trying to see them with your eyes, you're just having an image in your mind. And all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, think of them made of light. So it's not a painting, it's not concrete statues, it's beings who are made of light, who are looking at you with compassion and acceptance.
To the teacher endowed,
transcendent destroyer, one that's gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, straight make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans who were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your body's form supremely divine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, flame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme God, to you I bow. With the supreme sign, space like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, or perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit came sentient beings, obtain the state of self-seeing supremely full of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, endured by the waves of aging, sickness, and death.
Page 14. Is crowned
anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamyatayami I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma. May I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma. May I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma. May I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then let's cultivate our motivation and think that we'll be meditating and learning and sharing together this weekend. Not simply to improve our own Dharma practice and for our own peace of mind, but rather by doing that, through the ripple effect, to be able to make a positive contribution to the welfare of living beings. And so with a mind that feels our interdependence with others, the mind that cares and has compassion for ourselves and others, then we'll engage in Dharma practice this weekend. I'd like to talk a little bit at the beginning about the role of concentration in Buddhist practice. Yeah, because we're just focusing on one particular aspect of the Dharma this weekend. It's important that you have an idea of where it fits into the big picture. Okay. So when the Buddha taught, he taught the three higher trainings. Okay, higher training of ethical conduct, higher training of concentration, higher training of wisdom. And these form the outline of the path that we're following. Concentration itself is not a Buddhist practice. Okay, just developing concentration is not a Buddhist practice. People of other religions can do it. People with no religion at all can do it. Okay? So concentration is a tool. When the Buddha taught the higher training in concentration, that was a Buddhist practice because it's based on having refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and wanting to follow the path that the Buddha taught in order to gain liberation and full awakening. Okay, so do you see the difference just between some good quality and then it being a Buddhist quality? There's something that changes. Generosity is a human quality, isn't it? You don't need to be Buddhist. It's something that is stressed in other religions and also in secular life. Okay? But if we're going to practice the far-reaching generosity that the Buddha taught, then we have to have a different motivation than ordinary generosity. And we have to do it within the context of the Buddhist worldview and the aspiration for full awakening. Okay? This is important to remember, I think, because in our very secular Western world, we tend to want to secularize Buddhist practice, and make it very widely available to everybody. And it's good to take the techniques and things that the Buddha taught and make them widely available to everybody. You don't have to be a Buddhist to learn generosity, to learn concentration, to learn ethical conduct, to learn patience. Okay? So that's fine. But to make them Buddhist practices, then they have to be done in a certain mental milieu with a particular motivation and in a particular way, with renunciation, with bodhicitta, with an understanding of emptiness. Okay, you getting what I mean? Yeah? So while I think it's very good to share all these things as widely as possible, we also have to keep them as Buddhist practices, which requires a different element. Okay? So, within a Buddhist worldview, briefly speaking, we have a body and mind, and they're different natures. Our body is material, our mind is non-material. When they're together, it's called being alive. When those two continuums, the material and non-material elements, the body and the mind separate, that's called dying. From a Buddhist viewpoint, when our body and mind separate, then due to our previous actions and due to the craving and the ignorance on our mind stream, then there's this craving and clinging for another life, for another rebirth. And so we take another rebirth, under the influence of our actions, our karma. And in that next rebirth, then again we're having different afflictions arise: ignorance, anger, attachment, jealousy, arrogance. Those create actions. Sometimes we have good mental attitudes arising. Those create actions, but we're still under the influence of ignorance. And so at the time of death, then the craving and clinging arise again, and we go into another rebirth. And so we've been doing this since beginningless time. Okay? The way out of it is by generating the wisdom that realizes that the object the ignorant mind holds as true does not exist. Okay, so we're born under the influence of ignorance and craving because we are misapprehending how things exist. Okay, we don't even realize we're misapprehending how things exist because we're so used to seeing things this way. Okay? But when we begin to question that and see that things don't exist in the way they appear to us, then, and they actually exist in another way, then we begin to develop wisdom. When this wisdom completely sees the emptiness of all of our fantasized projections on phenomena, the emptiness of what we call true existence or inherent existence, then that wisdom can counteract the ignorance. Now, when the ignorance is subdued, then the afflictions which depend on it cannot arise. When the mental afflictions, the attachment and anger and closed-mindedness and so forth, can't arise, then we cease creating karma under their influence. And when we cease creating those actions that lead to more and more rebirth, then the cycle of rebirth stops. Okay? So that's why wisdom is important. Yeah. Wisdom is the thing that is actually going to remove all of the defilements from our mind. So the Buddha taught the higher practices, higher trainings in ethical conduct, concentration, wisdom. Wisdom is the ultimate one that we want to get. Now, in order to get wisdom, we have to be able to focus our mind on the object of meditation. If we're going to focus on the nature of reality, we have to be able to concentrate on it. If our mind is constantly disturbed by other thoughts or by falling asleep or drowsiness or distraction or whatever, we're not going to be able to discern the nature of reality, let alone concentrate on it for any period of time. And if we can't do that, then we can't eliminate the defilements. So the concentration, the higher training in concentration, is very, very important to, make the wisdom strong and to gain the wisdom to start with, because we need to be able to analyze clearly, and if we can't focus the mind, difficult to really investigate the nature of reality. Okay, so we need this higher training and concentration. Before we can concentrate our mind, okay, because concentrating our mind involves subduing the very gross level of afflictions. We all can see just 5 or 10 minutes of breathing meditation makes it really obvious to us how uncontrolled our mind is. Yeah? And how thoughts are coming in and going out and going all over the place, one right after the other. And if we look, many of the thoughts revolve around attachment. We're wanting something, we're craving for something, we're missing somebody. Or our thoughts are revolving around anger and resentment. We're mad at somebody. We feel bitter or resentful. We want revenge. We have ill will towards somebody. Sometimes our thoughts are just, plain stupadagios, reruns of sci-fi movies that we saw as kids, remembering commercial chants that we heard as kids, all sorts of rubbish just floating through the mind. Yeah, sometimes we are planning for the future, we're reminiscing about the past. We are anywhere but here. Okay? So, those are the gross level of afflictions that are manifesting that interfere with our concentration. So to gain concentration, we have to subdue that gross level. Yeah, the afflictions are eliminated completely so that they cannot return by the higher training in wisdom. But before we can eliminate them completely, we have to subdue the gross ones. That's done with the higher training in concentration. Okay. Now, in order to subdue the gross mental afflictions, we have to subdue their manifestation in our body and speech. Okay? So we're seeing how we're going from subtle into grosser now, okay? Yeah, to abandon the afflictions completely with the higher training of wisdom is more subtle. To do that, we need a slightly grosser thing to abandon the gross levels of the afflictions with the higher training of concentration. That revolves subduing the mind. But the mind is the most subtle of our 3 doors of action, body, speech, and mind. The mind is the most subtle. The body and speech are much grosser. They're known to other people. Our mind is not known to other people. Okay? And our physical and verbal actions all stem from the mind. If the mind does not move, if the mind does not have an intention, the mouth doesn't move, the body doesn't move. Okay? So if we're going to subdue the mental afflictions, just subdue the gross ones, then before we can do that, we have to subdue how they really manifest in the world in our body and speech. Okay? And so that is the higher training in ethical conduct. Yeah, the ethical conduct revolves subduing our very gross physical and verbal negativities. And that's where the taking of precepts come in particular, for most of you, the 5 lay precepts to abandon killing, stealing, unwise or unkind sexual behavior, lying, and intoxicants, or the monastic precepts, but some level of ethical restraint to subdue our body and speech. Yeah? Do your body and speech need subduing? Yeah. Do you ever say things that you really wish you hadn't said? Do you find yourself saying things and wondering why in the world you're saying them? Yeah. Do you find yourself doing things and saying, how in the world did I get myself into this situation? What in the world am I doing? This is ridiculous, as you keep on doing it. Okay? So we can see our body and speech need some subduing. And that's what's done by the higher training in ethical conduct. So we start with that very, very gross thing, and then go to subduing the mental afflictions, then go to eradicating the mental afflictions. Okay? So to develop concentration depends on having some ethical restraint. Yeah? So this is completely the opposite of my generation's branding, which was, if it feels good, do it. And if it doesn't feel good, blame somebody else. Which unfortunately my generation passed down to the next generations, but actually I don't think my generation was the one who invented it. I think this has existed since beginningless time. We just perfected it. But we see when we're developing concentration, there's 2 mental factors that are really crucially important. One is mindfulness, the other is introspective awareness. And these have very particular functions in the practice of concentration. To develop these within the practice of concentration, we have to first practice them in the training of ethical conduct. Okay, so these 2 mental factors, follow us through. We start developing them with ethical conduct, then go on to concentration. Then they become really complete in wisdom. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about what mindfulness and introspective awareness are. Mindfulness is the latest buzzword. Have you noticed? Everybody's talking about mindfulness. It's in Time magazine, it's in the newspaper, scientists are researching it, therapists are teaching it. Everybody wants to practice mindfulness. Okay? Mindfulness has a very particular meaning in a Buddhist context, and it's not always the meaning in which it is being broadly taught. Okay, so I want to really clarify its meaning within a Buddhist context. Yeah, well, how it's being broadly taught is definitely beneficial for people. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm saying if we're going to do it within the practice of ethical conduct and concentration, there it has a particular meaning. Okay, in ethical conduct, mindfulness means remembering our precepts. Okay, remembering the actions that we want to do, remembering what the actions that we don't want to do are. Okay, so the term mindfulness, okay, it's smriti in Sanskrit and sati in Pali. It's the same word as to remember. Okay? It's the same word as memory or to remember. So in the practice of ethical conduct, we're remembering our precepts. We're remembering what virtuous actions are so that we can do them. we're remembering what non-virtuous actions are so that we don't do them. Okay? So there's this element of discernment and wisdom with the mindfulness. Okay? So mindfulness is not just being aware of what's happening in the present moment. That's how it's widely taught. Yeah, and I think in Mahasi Sayadaw's tradition, he's a Burmese meditation master, I think it came to mean that, like bare attention about what is happening. But in broader Buddhist practice outside that tradition, it really has the implication of knowing what you want to put your mind on and putting your mind on it. Okay? So it comes together with wisdom. And we can see this because, it's possible to be completely, have bare observation. In other words, be mindful in the regular sense as it's commonly taught. Attachment is rising in my mind. Yeah, we can be mindful of that, can't we? Attachment is rising in my mind. I'm daydreaming about Prince Charming. I'm visualizing lying on the beach with Prince Charming in this perfect weather. You can be I'm completely mindful that I'm getting mad at him because he's not doing what I wanted. Yeah, you can be completely mindful of all this stuff going on in your mind in the sense of have bare attention and note what it is. Okay? That's not what is really meant by mindfulness in Buddhist practice. Okay? In Buddhist practice, that daydream arises. The factor of introspective awareness would notice that you're off in Never Never Land. And then you would invoke the other antidotal powers to bring your attention back, to renew your mindfulness so that you're focusing on what you want to focus on. Okay? So when we're interacting with people during the day, having, an awareness of how we want to act, what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous, is extremely important. And if we really develop strong mindfulness on this, our relationships with other human beings will improve dramatically. Yeah? And our regret will decrease dramatically. Yeah. When we develop mindfulness in our ethical conduct, then when we sit down to meditate, we aren't disturbed by the hindrance of regret because we haven't done the actions that we regret. Okay? So we aren't disturbed by the hindrance of regret. In the practice of concentration, the higher training of concentration, mindfulness is used to anchor our attention on the object of meditation. So mindfulness remembers the object of meditation, whether it's the breath, or loving kindness, or the image of the Buddha, or whatever your object of meditation is for developing concentration. Mindfulness knows that object, it remembers that object in such a way that another attitude or another emotion can't come in and take you away from your object of meditation. Okay? So mindfulness is really important when you're meditating because that's the thing that really keeps your mind on the object. It works together with the mental factor of attention and the mental factor of concentration and so on. But mindfulness is the one that remembers what your object is. Yeah, so when you're developing concentration, you always want to start out with your session by really developing that mindfulness. I am meditating on X. You say to yourself, you get a clear image of what X is. Yeah. So that's what mindfulness is. So you can see that in the practice of mindfulness in the practice of concentration depends on developing mindfulness in the practice of ethical conduct. Okay, there's a sequence there. If we don't keep ethical conduct, but we expect to sit down and meditate, we're not going to be very successful. Yeah, because we aren't dealing with the gross levels yet. We haven't subdued the gross levels yet. We're trying to subdue the subtle ones. Yeah. So we want to do these two in tandem. I'm not saying that our ethical conduct needs to be perfect before we develop concentration. But we have to really make ethical conduct, which we practice in the break times as well as in our sessions, something really important in our lives in order that our meditation also advance. Okay? So that's about mindfulness. Then there's this other mental factor, introspective awareness. This one, samprajana in Sanskrit and Pali, is translated in many, many different ways. So some translators call it vigilance, some say introspective, some say introspection, some say mental alertness, some say clear knowing. Okay, Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as clear knowing. There's so many different translations of this word. Yeah, and it's a very difficult word to translate. Yeah. But what it means is that you are aware of what you're thinking or doing or feeling or saying. Okay? It's a mental factor that is kind of reflexive in the sense that it checks up on and sees what is going on in my mind. Yeah. So in the practice of ethical conduct, we use introspective awareness to be aware of what our body and speech are doing. Okay? This is kind of how mindfulness is explained, but this is, really introspective awareness. And introspective awareness it's like if you're going somewhere in the car, introspective awareness knows where you're going, why you're going there, how you're going there. Okay? So it has this clarity about what you're doing. Yeah. And so if you have that introspective awareness, okay, I'm going to the store to buy milk, using this road, then, because the family needs milk. Okay, then when you get to the store, you buy the milk and you leave. If you don't have much introspective awareness, you buy the milk and you buy some chocolate cake to go with it, and you buy a pizza to have before the chocolate cake, and then when you get in the car to go home, then you think, oh, actually I can go somewhere else, or you start daydreaming, and so you miss your turn off. Okay? So introspective awareness has this awareness of, what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Yeah. So it works together with mindfulness to help us behave in an ethical way and not get off track. When we develop that introspective awareness in our daily life, practicing ethical restraint, then when we sit down to meditate, it has some substance to it, it's strong. And when we meditate, we use introspective awareness to see if we're still on the object of meditation or not. So mindfulness is what put our mind on the object of meditation. And then introspective awareness pops up from time to time, they say it's like a little spy, and it checks, am I still on my object of meditation? Or am I remembering something from 10 years ago, or daydreaming about Prince Charming, or planning my resume for the new job I want to get, you know? Okay? So introspective awareness is seeing if the mindfulness is still intact, or if we've gotten distracted. If we've gotten distracted, introspective awareness, rings the alarm bell, and then we apply whatever antidote is needed to bring our mind back to the object of meditation so that we can renew our mindfulness and keep it there. Okay? Now there's a couple more things I want to talk about in this session so that we're prepared for the meditation section in the next time. Okay? The Buddha taught many different objects of meditation for developing concentration. Okay? To some people, he taught what is called kasinas. These are, it might be a color, white, yellow, blue, red. A color, it might be a substance, earth, water, fire, something like that. So you start out with these kasina objects as the object of meditation, and you develop your concentration on that particular color, on that particular substance, something like that. The Buddha sometimes, he taught the four immeasurables, equanimity, love, compassion, and joy, also as objects that we can develop concentration on. Okay? He taught so many different objects of concentration because people have different aptitudes, different inclinations. Some objects are more easy for some people to develop their mindfulness on than other objects. Okay? The breath was a very commonly used object at the time of the Buddha, and in all religions actually, to develop concentration, because we're always breathing, hopefully. Yeah. So the breath is a very commonly used object, and even within Buddhism there's different ways of teaching how to use the breath as the object of meditation. Different teachers, different traditions may have slightly different emphases, different points of concentration, and so on and so forth. That's all fine. It's not that one is right and the others are wrong. This is all done because people have different aptitudes, different interests, different dispositions. Okay. Another object that the Buddha taught to use as the object of concentration is the image of the Buddha. Okay. So this one has some particular advantages that you don't find with, let's say, using the breath as the object of meditation. The breath, its advantage is that, it's there all the time. Okay? So you can come back to it. But it's also a very neutral object. Breath isn't virtuous, it's not non-virtuous, it's just the breath. Okay? If we use the image of the Buddha, it has the advantage of, creating a relationship with the fully awakened one. Yeah? When we visualize the Buddha, we automatically are thinking of the Buddha's qualities. We're automatically forming a relationship with the Buddha. Yeah. When you close your eyes and you think of the Buddha's, or even with your eyes open, you think of the Buddha's long and narrow, his eyes long and narrow. You think of his the expression on his face, which is completely accepting, completely compassionate. Yeah. When you visualize the Buddha, you're tuning in to what the Buddha's qualities are, because they radiate just through the way he's sitting, through that physical form. Now, in the same way, when we talk to people, we get so much information from their body language, and we often react more to their body language than we do to their words. In the same way, when we visualize the Buddha, simply through the Buddha's body language, we're getting some clue of what the awakened mind is like. Okay? And that makes an imprint on our mind that another object of meditation is not going to make on our mind. Okay? When you look at the Buddha and, he's sitting in the Vajra position. That one's called the Vajra, not the lotus position, the cross-legged Vajra position. And the stability that represents, the control of the inner energy. Yeah, it's not kind of how we sit, is it? We're like all dangling all over the place. But the Buddha's in the Vajra position with his legs, and there's a stable foundation there. Yeah. And then his left hand is in his lap in meditative equipoise. And he's holding the alms bowl. Okay, it's not a begging bowl. Buddhist monastics do not beg. They go on alms. There's a big difference. Beg is asking. Going on alms is you're with your bowl, and if people want to make offerings, they do so. Quite different. Okay, so he's holding his alms bowl, and when we visualize, the Buddha's alms bowl isn't filled with a peach. It's filled with blissful wisdom nectar that eliminates what's called the 4 maras. Now, in the mara is often an anthropologicalization of certain negativities. Yeah, in the scriptures, maras is this kind of certain kind of God that comes and creates problems. Okay, the Buddha's always, and his monastics are always having these conversations with Mara, because Mara comes to you when you're meditating and says, "What are you doing? You're sitting there watching your belly button. Your colleagues at work are not going to understand why you took your vacation leave to go on a meditation retreat. Get off this cushion and go get a life." Okay, that's what Mara says. Okay? Yeah. So Mara is the distraction. Sometimes there's something called the 4 maras. Ignorance, and the afflictions. Death, the 2nd mara. 3rd mara is our aggregates, our body and mind, taken under the influence of afflictions and karma. And then the 4th mara is said to be kind of like arrogance or attachment, some interfering force that makes our mind run after something that's kind of nice. Yeah. So this nectar in the Buddha's alms bowl is the nectar that cures the 4 maras. So it's wisdom nectar. Yeah. It's not real nectar that we take. It's a physical representation of the mind of wisdom and compassion that will actually cure our defilements and stop the rebirth process and so on. Okay? So the Buddha's left hand is in that very stable meditative position, holding the alms bowl with nectar. His right hand is in what's called the earth-touching position, with the palm down. When the Buddha first became enlightened, there were Mara came, and different beings came and said, "Well, how do we know you're really enlightened?" Yeah. And so the Buddha, with that gesture, touched the earth, and the earth goddess sprang up and said, I will testify that he is truly awakened. Okay? So it's an indication of the Buddha's confidence in his own spiritual realizations. Not arrogance, but the confidence, the certainty in the mind that the defilements have been eliminated, that all the good qualities have been developed. Okay? And then the Buddha's long earlobes. He was a prince, so he had very heavy jewelry. Yeah, that's how those earlobes got stretched. Kind of like maybe people piercing nowadays. You know, modern day Buddha's going to have long earlobes, a hole in their tongue, holes here, you know. Okay, but in the case of the Buddha, it is indicating his renunciation. Yeah, because when he left the palace to seek the spiritual path, when he left the comfort of the home life to find the remedy for aging, sickness, and death, he had to get rid of all of his finery, his silks and fancy clothes and designer jeans and everything like that. And he also had to get rid of his jewelry. And so, but the earlobes are still long, showing that he freely, happily gave up these comforts of this life for the spiritual path. Okay? When you look at the Buddha's face, yeah, and his peaceful expression, it's really remarkable. And if you have a Buddha image in your house, it's very effective. When you get frazzled and you walk by that Buddha image, you stop and you look at the Buddha's expression, and the Buddha's so peaceful, and it makes you think, oh, I can be like that too. Let's slow down here. Okay? So, and then just the Buddha looking at us with acceptance. I went many years meditating on the Buddha before I realized that I wasn't really imagining him looking at me with acceptance. I kind of skipped over that part. Mm-hmm. And I think many of us in the West have that difficulty. Yeah, we don't feel acceptable, so we can't imagine anybody looking at us with acceptance. So it's a big challenge to our self-hatred, our self-loathing, our self-deprecation, all of our feelings of I'm not good enough, all of our feelings of shame, all that garbage that is ruminating there under the surface that keeps us from really making our life meaningful. When you imagine the Buddha looking at you with total acceptance, it changes how you view yourself. And you can't hold on to those negative self-attitudes. Yeah? So to get yourself to just imagine somebody looking at you with total acceptance requires a stretch on our part. It's like, oh, the Buddha's looking at me with total acceptance. Ooh, how can he do that? Well, he is, and we have to sit there and take it. Because that's what we've always wanted, is somebody who completely accepts us and doesn't judge us. Isn't it? Isn't that what we all want in the depth of our heart? So there it is, so don't push it away. Yeah? And the Buddha is looking at us not just with total acceptance, but also with compassion, with some kind of understanding, with wanting us to be free of our afflictions, wanting us to be free of our misery. Okay? So, we engage with the Buddha. When we imagine the Buddha looking at us in that way, it affects us. Yeah? Then you have the Buddha's hair. Yeah? personally speaking, I don't think the Buddha really had blue hair that was in curls. But in ancient India, there were signs, 32 signs of a great being, and the hair, like that, was one of them. The earlobes are another one. There's, different signs on the hands and feet and so on that are all signs of a great person. It's from Indian culture. Okay? So he has, the blue hair, and each strand is individual, curled to the right. I had curly hair in high school that was a source of so much shame, because I had dark curly hair and you were supposed to have straight blonde hair. Remember high school? And all this stuff. So, here's the Buddha with, each hair individually curled. Yeah. I forget exactly what it represents. I can look it up, but it's one of his realizations. And then there's the crown protuberance, okay, which represents the incredible amount of merit or goodness or positive energy that he created in order to become a fully awakened one. Okay? So that's one of the signs of a Buddha that's created due to practicing generosity for eons and ethical conduct and fortitude and joyous effort and so on and so forth for long periods of time, creating all that merit. So when you visualize the Buddha, and his body's made of light, okay, you're getting in touch with the Buddha's qualities. It's making you think about what a Buddha is and what you have the potential to become. And it's establishing a link between you and the Buddha and deepening your refuge in the Buddha. Okay? So that's why it's often recommended to use the Buddha as the object to develop concentration. Okay? So I'm going to recommend that we try that this weekend. Yeah. Some people may feel uncomfortable with that. If you want to use the breath or something else, that's fine. But you might want to just try using the image of the Buddha and see what happens. Okay? When we use the image of the Buddha, we go over we review the details of the image and then focus on whatever image we get and be satisfied with that. It's not going to be 100% clear, but just feel like you're in the presence of the Buddha and meditate on that, with the Buddha in front of you. Okay? If the image fades, if you get distracted, then again, go through, his eyes look like this, and his nose and his ears, and go through the whole thing. Many people say, but I can't visualize. Okay, can you think, if I say your mother, do you have an image of your mother in your mind? Even with your eyes open? Okay, that's visualization. If I say pizza, you have an image in your mind? Yeah. If I say President Obama, you get an image in your mind? Okay, all that's visualization. So don't squeeze yourself saying I can't visualize. It's just an image appearing into our mental consciousness. And then there's one more thing I want to talk about. Sorry, there's a lot of explanation this session to set the stage for what's following. In the afternoon session, what we'll do next session is we'll do the chanting, and then we'll do some meditation using the Buddha as our object of meditation. Okay? And we'll do it for periods of 15 minutes. So meditate, there'll be a bell. The time of the bell, you can just open your eyes and look around if you want to. A minute or two later, we'll have another bell, and then you start meditating again. So, just short periods of concentration. Yeah, when the period after the bell rings, if you need to stretch, you can do that, so that when there's the 15 minutes of concentration, you don't have to move. Okay. In the afternoon, we will do alternating periods of walking meditation and breathing meditation, and we'll do it in the garden. Okay? Actually, what maybe we'll do is we'll come back in here. We'll start the session off in here. I'll explain a little bit about walking meditation at that time, and then we'll all go out and for the rest of the session do alternating sitting and walking. Okay? If you have a yoga mat, bring it out in the garden. We have some yoga mats somewhere. Maybe, John, you can find them and put them out in the garden before that session. And so when we ring the bell to sit, then you just go to the closest mat, or you sit on your shoes, or you sit on one of the chairs in the garden, or somewhere. Yeah? It's very nice to meditate outdoors. Yeah, we did this last year, and people really, really liked it. Okay. So we're going to stop now. I know there hasn't been time for questions, but there will be an optional Q&A session after lunch. And then in the session we have late in the afternoon. I'll try and leave some time for questions then too. Okay? So we'll dedicate. The verses are on page
14, folks. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual masters be stable, and your virtuous action spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.